The blood-red sunset bathed the dusty streets of Silverwater Creek in an eerie glow as Olivia Caldwell staggered into town, her torn dress caked with mud, her desperate eyes scanning the buildings for the sheriff's office. The year was 1885, and justice in the Arizona Territory was as scarce as rainfall in August. "Help me, please," Olivia gasped, collapsing against the counter in Sheriff Thomas Parker's office. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins, cascading wildly down her shoulders. "They've taken everything." The sheriff barely looked up from his desk, his weathered face creased with indifference as he continued polishing his revolver. "And who might you be, Miss Olivia Caldwell? My father's homestead was attacked by the Donovan gang last night." Her voice trembled but held firm. "They killed our farmhand, burned our barn, and stole our cattle. My father's been shot." Sheriff Parker's eyes narrowed, finally meeting hers. "The Donovan gang, you say?" He set down his revolver, leaning forward with sudden interest. "That's quite a claim. Where's this homestead of yours?" 20 miles east, near Rattlesnake Ridge." Olivia's hands clutched the edge of the counter. "My father needs a doctor. I rode all night to get here." The sheriff rose slowly, walking around his desk to study her more carefully. "Funny thing, Miss Caldwell. I received word just yesterday that the Donovan gang was spotted across the territory line, headed into New Mexico." He circled her like a vulture. "Yet here you are claiming they attacked your farm last night." "I know what I saw," Olivia insisted, her green eyes flashing with anger. "I recognized Bart Donovan himself. Please, my father is dying." Sheriff Parker's laugh was dry and humorless. "Do you now? And I suppose you've met Bart Donovan at a social, have you?" He shook his head. "Miss, we get all sorts in here spinning tales. Some wanting attention, others hoping to settle personal scores by blaming notorious outlaws." "I'm not lying." Olivia's voice rose, drawing the attention of the deputy dozing in the corner. "Your homestead's been mighty quiet for months," the sheriff continued, stroking his mustache. "Word is your father's been struggling to make payments to the bank. Convenient time for an attack, wouldn't you say?" Olivia's face flushed with anger and humiliation. "How dare you? My father is an honest man. We may have fallen on hard times, but we would never, Sheriff." The door swung open, cutting off Olivia's protest. A tall figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the evening light. Sebastian Quinn stepped into the office, removing his hat in one fluid motion. His presence commanded attention, immediately broad-shouldered and trail-worn, with eyes the color of a summer storm. Dust from the trail coated his leather chaps, and a week's worth of stubble darkened his jaw. Despite the grime of travel, there was something undeniably striking about him. "Miss Caldwell speaking the truth," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of steel. "I was tracking the Donovans when I came across the burning homestead, helped her father best I could before sending her for proper help." The sheriff's expression shifted, caution replacing dismissal. Sebastian Quinn wasn't a man unknown in these parts. A former Texas Ranger turned bounty hunter, his reputation for tracking outlaws was matched only by his unwavering moral code. "Quinn," Sheriff Parker acknowledged with a nod. "Been a while. Not long enough, apparently." Sebastian's gaze never left the sheriff's face. "If you're calling this lady a liar, we have a problem. Her word is law to me." The room fell silent. Even the deputy, now fully awake, watched the exchange with wide eyes. "You vouching for her story, Quinn?" The sheriff asked, his tone markedly more respectful. "Every word. And if you don't get a doctor out there soon, her father won't see morning." Sebastian turned to Olivia, his expression softening slightly. "Miss Caldwell, my horse is outside. We'll ride back together after the doctor's gathered his supplies." Olivia's relief was visible, though her suspicious glance between the two men revealed her bewilderment at the sudden change in the sheriff's demeanor. Sheriff Parker cleared his throat. "Jenkins," he called to the deputy, "go fetch Dr. Mitchell. Tell him it's urgent." As the deputy scrambled out, the sheriff turned back to Sebastian. "You tracking the Donovans for the bounty?" I'm tracking them because they've left a trail of dead families across 3 territories, Sebastian answered coldly. The bounty's secondary. Olivia watched this exchange with growing impatience. My father is dying while you discuss bounties, she said, her voice breaking. Please, we need to go now. Sebastian nodded, placing his hat back on his head. The lady's right. We're wasting time. He gestured toward the door. Doctor can follow our trail, let's ride. Outside, Sebastian helped Olivia mount his chestnut stallion before swinging up behind her. The closeness was improper by any social standard, but necessity overruled convention. As they rode out of town, Olivia's rigid posture gradually relaxed against Sebastian's chest, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Thank you, she whispered, her words nearly lost in the thunder of hoofbeats. Why did you help me? You don't even know me. Sebastian's reply came after a moment of consideration. Truth doesn't need acquaintance, Miss Caldwell. I saw what happened at your farm. Rest now. We've got a hard ride ahead. As they galloped through the gathering darkness, neither could have anticipated how their fates had just become irrevocably intertwined, or that the Donovans would be the least of their concerns in the days to come. The moon hung high and full by the time they reached the Caldwell homestead. The barn still smoldered, sending wisps of smoke into the night sky. Sebastian helped Olivia dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Your father's in the house, he asked, his voice low. Olivia nodded, already rushing toward the modest wooden structure. I left him in his bed. I managed to stop the bleeding before I rode for help. Inside, Henry Caldwell lay pale and still, his breathing shallow. Olivia immediately went to his side, pressing a hand to his forehead. He's burning with fever, she said, panic edging into her voice. Sebastian examined the wound on the older man's shoulder. Bullet went clean through, but infection's setting in. He looked around the simple cabin. Do you have any whiskey? Olivia nodded, retrieving a bottle from a cupboard. Sebastian took it, pouring some onto a clean cloth before gently cleaning the wound. Henry moaned but didn't wake. I've seen men survive worse, Sebastian said, his tone reassuring. Your father seems strong. He is, Olivia replied, her eyes never leaving her father's face. Mama died 5 years ago. He's kept us going since then, never complained even when the drought took half our cattle. She looked up at Sebastian suddenly. You said you saw what happened. Were you watching our farm? Sebastian continued his ministrations as he answered. I've been tracking the Donovans for 3 weeks, lost their trail yesterday morning, then saw smoke on the horizon. His jaw tightened. By the time I got here, they were gone, found your father shot and you trying to stop the bleeding. I don't remember seeing you, Olivia frowned. You were in shock. I helped you get him inside, told you to ride for the doctor while I made him comfortable. Sebastian's eyes met hers. You don't remember me telling you I'd come to town after you? Olivia shook her head slowly. Everything's a blur after finding father. She studied Sebastian's face more carefully in the lamplight. But I'm grateful you were there, Mr. Quinn. Sebastian, he corrected gently. And there's no need for gratitude. The Donovans have a lot to answer for, and your father's just their latest victim. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Sebastian immediately moved to the window, his hand resting on his pistol. It's the doctor, he said, relaxing slightly. And it looks like the sheriff decided to come along after all, Doctor. Mitchell bustled in, medical bag in hand, with Sheriff Parker following more slowly behind. The doctor immediately went to work examining Henry, while the sheriff stood awkwardly by the door, his hat in his hands. Miss Caldwell, he began, clearly uncomfortable. Seems I owe you an apology. The evidence here supports your account. Olivia merely nodded, too exhausted and concerned for her father to acknowledge the sheriff's words. Quinn, the sheriff continued, turning to Sebastian, I've sent telegrams to the neighboring towns. If the Donovans are still in the territory, we'll find them. They won't have gone far, Sebastian replied, not with a herd of stolen cattle to move. The doctor looked up from his examination. This man needs proper care. The wound itself isn't fatal, but the infection could kill him if not treated aggressively. He turned to Olivia. He should be moved to town where I can monitor him. We can't leave the homestead, Olivia protested. If we abandon it now, we'll lose everything. You can't stay here alone, the sheriff pointed out. Not with the Donovans possibly returning to finish what they started. Sebastian had been silent, watching the exchange. Miss Caldwell won't be alone, he said finally. I'll stay until her father's well enough to return. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him in surprise. That wouldn't be proper, the doctor began. Nothing proper about leaving a woman unprotected with killers on the loose either, Sebastian countered. I'll sleep in the barn, what's left of it, and keep watch. The lady's reputation will remain intact. Olivia looked at Sebastian with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Mr. Quinn, I can't ask you to delay your pursuit of the Donovans. You didn't ask, Miss Caldwell, I offered. His eyes held hers steadily. Besides, they stole your cattle. Tracking them from here makes more sense than riding back and forth to town. The sheriff nodded slowly. Quinn's right, and having him here might discourage the Donovans from returning. He turned to Olivia. We'll bring your father to town in my wagon. Dr. Mitchell will see to him. And I'll send some men out tomorrow to help with repairs to your barn. Olivia wanted to protest further, but exhaustion and practicality won out. Thank you, she said finally. I'll pack some things for my father. As dawn broke the next morning, Olivia stood in the doorway of her home, watching the wagon carrying her father disappear over the horizon. Sheriff Parker had promised to send word daily about her father's condition, but the separation still felt like another loss in a string of too many. She turned to find Sebastian leading his horse from what remained of the barn, a rifle slung over his shoulder. I'm going to track the cattle, he said, tightening his saddle. Should be back by sundown. Olivia nodded, suddenly aware of how alone they were. Mr. Quinn, Sebastian, I don't know how to thank you. You can thank me by staying alert while I'm gone, he replied, checking his pistol before holstering it. Keep this door barred, and there's a shotgun under your father's bed. You know how to use it. I grew up on this homestead, Olivia said with a small smile. Father made sure I could protect myself. Something like approval flickered in Sebastian's eyes. Good. Still, the Donovans usually travel as a group. If you see anyone approaching, don't try to be brave. Hide until I return. I'm not afraid, Olivia stated, lifting her chin. That's what worries me, Sebastian replied, swinging into the saddle. His eyes softened slightly. Be careful, Miss Caldwell. Olivia, she corrected. If I'm to call you Sebastian, you should use my given name as well. A hint of a smile crossed his face. Olivia, then. He tipped his hat and turned his horse, riding toward the eastern hills where the cattle had last been seen. Alone, Olivia surveyed the damage to their property in the harsh light of day. The barn was a charred skeleton, their small herd gone and the vegetable garden trampled. Yet the house stood and her father lived. They could rebuild if the bank didn't foreclose first. She spent the day cleaning her father's blood from the floorboards, salvaging what she could from the barn, and reinforcing the door and windows. Physical labor helped keep her mind from dwelling on her fears for her father, for their future, and increasingly for the mysterious man who had come to her aid. Sebastian Quinn was not what she'd expected. His reputation as a relentless bounty hunter preceded him, yet he had shown her nothing but respect and kindness. There was a gentleness in his hands as he tended to her father that belied his dangerous appearance. As the sun began its descent, Olivia prepared a simple meal from their dwindling supplies. She was stirring a pot of beans when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Grabbing the shotgun, she moved to the window, relief washing over her when she recognized Sebastian's broad-shouldered silhouette. He dismounted wearily, leading his horse to the water trough before approaching the house. Olivia opened the door before he could knock. Any luck? She asked, noticing the lines of fatigue on his face. Sebastian shook his head. Found their trail heading south. They've split the herd, making it harder to track. He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. But I found something else you should know about. The grim note in his voice made Olivia's stomach tighten. "What is it?" "Let's talk inside," he said, glancing around the darkening landscape. At the table, Sebastian refused food until Olivia insisted, watching him eat with the efficiency of a man accustomed to taking meals when available rather than when desired. "The Donovans didn't choose your ranch by accident," he said finally, pushing his empty plate away. "I found tracks circling your property from several days before the attack. They were watching you, learning your routines." Olivia frowned. "But why? We're not wealthy." "Our herd was small compared to the Thompson Ranch just 10 miles west." "It's not about the cattle," Sebastian said, his gray eyes holding hers. "I think it's about your land, our land. It's good grazing land but nothing special. Except for the creek that runs through the north corner." Sebastian leaned forward. "That creek never runs dry, does it, even in drought years?" Olivia's eyes widened slightly. "No, it doesn't. Father always said it was fed by an underground spring." "Water rights are more valuable than gold in these parts," Sebastian explained. "I found survey markers about a half-mile upstream from your property line, recent ones." "I don't understand. Who would be surveying land that isn't for sale? Someone who doesn't intend to buy it legitimately." Sebastian's voice hardened. "The timing isn't coincidental. Your father being in debt to the bank, then suddenly attacked by outlaws. If your father died and you couldn't keep up the payments, the bank would foreclose." Olivia stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "Are you suggesting someone hired the Donovans to drive us off our land?" "It's happened before." Sebastian watched her closely. "Do you know who holds your father's loan, Whitman Banking and Trust in Silverwater Creek?" Olivia stopped pacing, her mind racing. "Mr. Whitman himself handled the loan. He's always been civil to father, even when we fell behind on payments." "Whitman," Sebastian repeated thoughtfully. "I've heard that name connected to the railroad interests moving into the territory." A knock at the door startled them both. Sebastian rose immediately, motioning for Olivia to step aside as he drew his pistol. "Who's there?" he called. "Deputy Jenkins with supplies from town," came the reply. Sebastian opened the door cautiously, relaxing when he saw the young deputy standing there with a wagon loaded with lumber and provisions. "Sheriff sent me with these," Jenkins explained, nodding to Olivia. "Said you might need help rebuilding that barn." "That's very kind," Olivia said, genuinely surprised by the sheriff's thoughtfulness. "How's my father?" she asked as Sebastian helped unload the supplies. "Holding his own, according to Doc Mitchell," Jenkins replied. "Fever broke this morning. Doc says it's a good sign." He hesitated. "Sheriff also wanted me to tell you that there's been no sign of the Donovans, but he's doubled the patrols around town." "Thank you, Deputy," Sebastian said, effectively dismissing the young man. As Jenkins prepared to leave, he turned back. "Almost forgot. Mr. Whitman from the bank was asking about you, Miss Caldwell. Seemed mighty concerned when he heard about the attack." Olivia and Sebastian exchanged a look. "Did he now?" Sebastian said casually. "That's neighborly of him." After the deputy departed, Olivia helped Sebastian store the supplies. "You think Whitman's involved, don't you?" she asked quietly. "I think it's a possibility we can't ignore," Sebastian replied. "But we need proof before making accusations against the most powerful man in the county." That night, Sebastian insisted on sleeping on the porch despite Olivia's offer of her father's bed. Their conversation had turned to more personal matters as they sat by the fire, Olivia speaking of her childhood on the homestead. Her mother's death from influenza. Her father's determination to keep the land that had been in the Caldwell family for 2 generations. Sebastian shared less, but enough for Olivia to piece together parts of his story. Orphaned young, raised by his uncle in Texas, joining the Rangers at 18, and eventually turning to bounty hunting after an incident he refused to elaborate on. "Why did you really help me?" Olivia asked as the fire burned low. "You could have captured the Donovans yourself without getting involved in our troubles." Sebastian was silent for a long moment. "I saw something in you that reminded me of someone I once knew," he finally said. "A determination to fight even when the odds were stacked against you." His eyes met hers across the dimly lit room. It's rare to find that kind of courage. Olivia felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "I'm not brave," she said softly. "Just stubborn, according to my father." A smile tugged at the corner of Sebastian's mouth. "Sometimes they're the same thing." He rose from his chair. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start rebuilding that barn." For the next 3 days they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings were spent working on the barn, Sebastian's skilled hands making quick work of the frame while Olivia handed him tools and held boards in place. In the afternoons, Sebastian would ride out, tracking the Donovan's movements and scouting the surrounding area for any signs of their return. Evenings were spent in quiet conversation, a growing comfort developing between them that neither acknowledged openly. Olivia found herself watching Sebastian when he wasn't looking the way his hands moved with surprising gentleness despite their strength, the rare smile that transformed his solemn face, the intensity in his eyes when he spoke of justice. On the 4th day, a rider approached just before noon. Sebastian immediately positioned himself between Olivia and the approaching figure, his hand resting on his pistol. As the rider drew closer, Olivia recognized the portly figure of Mr. Whitman, the banker. Sebastian's posture remained alert, even as Olivia stepped forward to greet their visitor. "Miss Caldwell," Whitman called, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "I came as soon as business allowed. Such a terrible thing that's happened to your property." His small eyes darted to Sebastian, then back to Olivia. "I see you have assistance." "Mr. Quinn has been kind enough to help with repairs," Olivia replied, noting the banker's obvious discomfort with Sebastian's presence. "Yes, well, very fortunate," Whitman said, wiping his brow with a handkerchief. "I've come about your father's loan, Miss Caldwell. Given the circumstances, I wanted to discuss options personally." Sebastian stepped forward. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, out of the sun." Whitman followed them into the house, his gaze taking in the modest furnishings with poorly disguised assessment. Once seated at the table, he placed a leather portfolio before him. "Miss Caldwell, your father's next payment is due in 2 weeks. Given his condition and the loss of your cattle, I assume meeting this obligation will be difficult." His tone was sympathetic, but his eyes were calculating. "We've never missed a payment, Mr. Whitman," Olivia said firmly. "We may need an extension, but we'll honor our debts." Whitman smiled thinly. Of course, which is why I've come to offer a solution." He opened the portfolio, removing several documents. "I'm prepared to buy your property outright. The amount would cover your father's loan and leave enough for a fresh start elsewhere. Perhaps in town, where your father could recover in comfort." Sebastian, who had been leaning against the wall, straightened. "That's mighty generous, considering the circumstances. What's your interest in this particular piece of land, Mr. Whitman?" The banker's smile faltered slightly. "Simply looking out for a valued customer. The Caldwells have been through enough hardship." "And the survey markers recently placed upstream?" Sebastian asked casually. "Would those have anything to do with your sudden generosity?" Whitman's face reddened. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Quinn, but I assure you my offer is made in good faith." "No doubt," Sebastian replied, his voice deceptively mild. "Just like the Donovan gang happened to attack this specific homestead right when Miss Caldwell's father was struggling with his payments." The banker stood abruptly. "I won't sit here and be accused of criminal activity. Miss Caldwell, I came here as a courtesy. The offer stands for 3 days. After that, I expect your payment as scheduled." He gathered his papers with trembling hands. "Good day to you both." After Whitman's hasty departure, Olivia turned to Sebastian, her face pale. "You think he hired the Donovans?" "I think the timing is too convenient to be coincidence," Sebastian replied, watching through the window as Whitman rode away. "But accusations without proof are dangerous, especially against a man like Whitman. What do we do now?" Olivia asked, sinking into a chair. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. We need to find out what's so special about your land that Whitman's willing to resort to such measures, and we need to locate the Donovans. They're the key to proving the connection. That evening, a letter arrived from Dr. Mitchell, delivered by a young boy from town. Olivia's father was improving steadily but would need at least another week of care before he could return home. The news was a relief, but it also meant Olivia had to make decisions about their future without her father's counsel. What would you do? She asked Sebastian as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. If this was your land, your life, Sebastian considered her question carefully. I don't own anything that can't fit in my saddlebags, he said finally. Haven't for years. Makes it hard to imagine being rooted to one place. That sounds lonely, Olivia observed, studying his profile. It can be, he admitted, surprising her with his candor. But there's freedom in it too, no obligations except the ones I choose. And yet you chose to help us, she pointed out softly, to delay your hunt for the Donovans. Sebastian turned to look at her, his gray eyes reflecting the fading light. Some choices make themselves, Olivia. The way he said her name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the evening air. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them charged with unspoken possibilities. Sebastian broke the spell first, standing and stretching his tall frame. I'll ride out at first light tomorrow. The Donovans can't have gone far with that many cattle. If I can find them, maybe I can get one of them to talk about who hired them. You're leaving? Olivia couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Just for a day or two, he reassured her. Deputy Jenkins will stay with you while I'm gone. Olivia stood, suddenly indignant. I don't need a babysitter, Sebastian. I managed this homestead with my father for years before you came along. This isn't about your capabilities, Sebastian said, his voice gentle but firm. It's about the fact that someone wants this land badly enough to resort to violence. I won't leave you unprotected. The concern in his eyes softened Olivia's anger. Very well, she conceded, but please be careful. The Donovans aren't known for surrendering peacefully. A hint of a smile crossed Sebastian's face. I've been tracking outlaws for years, Olivia. I know how to handle myself. I'm beginning to think you enjoy making me worry, she replied, attempting to match his light tone despite the genuine concern she felt. No, he said, his expression growing serious. That's the last thing I want to do. The intensity in his gaze made Olivia's breath catch. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers lightly touching his arm, then come back safely. Sebastian covered her hand with his own, the rough calluses of his palm a stark contrast to her softer skin. I promise. Morning came too quickly. Olivia rose before dawn to prepare supplies for Sebastian's journey, packing dried beef, biscuits, and a jar of preserves. She found him already at the corral, saddling his horse. You didn't have to get up, he said when he saw her approaching with the provisions. I wanted to, she replied simply, handing him the bundle. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and Olivia felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Deputy Jenkins arrived as Sebastian was making final preparations, looking uncomfortable and out of place on the homestead. Remember what I told you, Sebastian said to Olivia as he mounted his horse. Stay alert, and don't trust anyone who comes calling, especially Whitman or his associates. I won't, she promised. Good hunting. With a final nod to both Olivia and the deputy, Sebastian rode out, his figure gradually diminishing against the vast landscape until he disappeared from view entirely. The day passed slowly. Deputy Jenkins proved to be well-meaning but utterly useless with farm work. Olivia found herself directing him in the simplest tasks, her patience wearing thin as she thought of how efficiently she and Sebastian had worked together on the barn. By evening, she was exhausted and irritable, snapping at Jenkins over dinner until the poor man retreated to the porch to smoke his pipe. Immediately contrite, Olivia joined him, apologizing for her behavior. No need for apologies, Miss Caldwell, Jenkins said, embarrassed. You've been through a terrible ordeal. That's no excuse for poor manners, Olivia replied, settling onto the porch step. Tell me, Deputy, what do you know of Mr. Whitman? Jenkins looked surprised by the question. Mr. Whitman, he's a pillar of the community. Owns the bank, has interests in several businesses in town. Why do you ask? Just curious, Olivia said casually. He made an offer to buy our land yesterday, seemed very eager. Did he now? Jenkins puffed thoughtfully on his pipe. Can't say I'm surprised. There's been talk in town about some big development coming, a rail spur or something similar. Land values are sure to rise. Olivia's interest sharpened. A rail spur coming through this area, Jenkins nodded. That's the rumor. Nothing official announced yet, but Mr. Whitman's been buying up properties west of town. He hesitated. Though I probably shouldn't be gossiping about such matters. Of course not, Olivia agreed, her mind racing. A railroad would explain Whitman's interest in their land, especially if the survey markers Sebastian had found indicated the proposed route would cross their property. Water rights and railroad access would make their modest homestead incredibly valuable. The next morning, Olivia was splitting kindling when she heard riders approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, her heart leaping at the thought that Sebastian had returned early. Instead, she saw 3 unfamiliar men riding toward the house. Deputy. She called, setting down her axe. Jenkins emerged from the barn, squinting at the approaching riders. His hand moved instinctively to his pistol. As the men drew closer, Olivia noted their well-dressed appearance. Not cowboys or ranch hands, but businessmen by the look of them. The leader, a tall man with a meticulously trimmed beard, reined in his horse first. Miss Caldwell, he inquired, removing his hat. Harold Lancaster, representing the Arizona and New Mexico Railroad Company, may we have a word? Olivia exchanged a glance with Jenkins before nodding cautiously. You may dismount, gentlemen. Once inside, Lancaster wasted no time getting to business. Miss Caldwell, our company is planning a rail line through this region. Your property sits at a crucial juncture for our proposed route. He spread a map on the table, pointing to a line that indeed crossed through the northern portion of their land. We're prepared to make a very generous offer for a right-of-way through your property. I see, Olivia said carefully. And does Mr. Whitman know of your visit here today? Lancaster's expression flickered with surprise before settling back into professional smoothness. Mr. Whitman is indeed one of our investors, but I represent the railroad directly. Interesting, Olivia replied. Mr. Whitman was here yesterday, offering to buy our entire property. He didn't mention anything about a railroad. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Perhaps he was acting in anticipation of our needs, Lancaster suggested smoothly. In any case, our offer stands independently. We're prepared to pay 5 times the going rate for the affected acreage. The sum he named made Olivia's eyes widen despite her efforts to remain impassive. It would be enough to pay off their loan and secure their future for years to come. I appreciate your offer, Mr. Lancaster, she said after a moment. But I can't make such a decision without consulting my father. He's currently recovering in town. Lancaster's smile tightened slightly. Of course. However, time is of the essence. Our surveyors need to finalize the route within the week. He placed a document on the table. This is our formal offer. Perhaps you could ride into town today to discuss it with your father. Olivia recognized the pressure tactic for what it was. My father is too ill for business discussions. You'll have to wait until he's recovered. Miss Caldwell, one of the other men interjected, his tone less patient than Lancaster's. Surely you understand the opportunity before you. Many landowners would consider themselves extremely fortunate to receive such an offer. And many others might wonder why such generosity is accompanied by such urgency, she countered, her green eyes flashing. Gentlemen, my answer remains the same. I will discuss this with my father when he's well enough. Lancaster gathered the papers with barely concealed irritation. Very well. We'll return in 3 days. I hope you'll have reconsidered by then." His gaze swept the modest cabin. It would be a shame to miss such an opportunity due to sentimentality. After they departed, Jenkins let out a low whistle. "Miss Caldwell, do you know how much money you just turned down?" "I know exactly how much," Olivia replied, watching the men ride away. "And I know that honest businessmen don't usually resort to veiled threats when their first offer is refused." "What will you do?" Jenkins asked. Olivia squared her shoulders. "Wait for Sebastian to return. And then get to the bottom of what's really happening here." 2 more days passed with no sign of Sebastian. Olivia's worry grew with each passing hour, though she tried to hide it from the increasingly restless deputy. On the morning of the 3rd day, she was in the barn mending tack when she heard Jenkins call out an alarm. She rushed outside to find 4 riders approaching, but these were not businessmen. Their rough appearance and the way they spread out as they approached the homestead sent a chill through her. "Get inside, Miss Caldwell," Jenkins ordered, drawing his pistol. "I think that's the Donovan gang." Olivia ran for the house, grabbing her father's shotgun from behind the door. Through the window, she watched as Jenkins confronted the approaching riders. "That's far enough." The deputy called out. "State your business," the lead rider, a burly man with a wild red beard, laughed. "Our business is with the Caldwell woman. Stand aside, boy, and you might live to see sundown." "I'm Deputy Jenkins of Silverwater Creek," Jenkins replied, his voice only slightly unsteady. "You men are trespassing. Turn around now." The red-headed man, Bart Donovan, Olivia presumed exchanged amused glances with his companions. "A deputy, is it? All by yourself out here?" He leaned forward in his saddle. "Where's Quinn? Word is he's been staying here." "Gone hunting," Jenkins answered, his pistol still aimed at Donovan. "For you, as it happens." Donovan's amusement vanished. "Then we'd best conclude our business before he returns." Without warning, he drew his pistol and fired. Jenkins crumpled to the ground. Olivia stifled a scream, watching in horror as Donovan dismounted and kicked the fallen deputy, checking if he was still alive. "Just winged him," Donovan announced to his men. "Gut shot. He'll take hours to die." He turned toward the house. "Come on out, Miss Caldwell. Let's talk about that land of yours." Olivia's hands tightened on the shotgun. She had one chance to end this, or at least buy time until Sebastian returned. Moving silently to the back door, she slipped out and circled around to the remains of the old root cellar, positioning herself with a clear view of the men now dismounting in front of her house. Taking a deep breath, she aimed at the water barrel near the men's horses and fired. The barrel exploded, spraying water and splintered wood. The horses reared and bolted, and the men scattered for cover. "That was a warning," Olivia shouted. "The next shot goes through Bart Donovan's head." Silence fell across the yard. Olivia could see Jenkins still moving weakly on the ground, but he was too far away for her to reach safely. "You've got spirit, girl, I'll give you that," Donovan called back. "But you're outnumbered and outgunned. Whitman's paying us good money to make sure this land changes hands. Way I see it, you've got 2 choices: sell to him willingly, or we bury you beside your deputy friend there." "So Whitman did hire you," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just like he hired you to attack us before." Donovan laughed. "Smart too." "Yeah, banker man's got big plans for this worthless dirt. Seems there's a railroad coming through, and your little creek is right where they need to build a water station." One of Donovan's men had been slowly circling toward Olivia's position. She swung the shotgun toward him. "Stay back." "I've got another barrel loaded." The man froze, looking to Donovan for instructions. Olivia's mind raced. She couldn't hold them all off for long, and Jenkins needed medical attention urgently. A sudden gunshot from the distant ridge made everyone freeze. One of Donovan's men clutched his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. "That would be far enough, Donovan," Sebastian's voice carried across the homestead. He appeared at the top of the ridge, rifle aimed steadily. "The next shot won't be a warning." Relief flooded through Olivia at the sight of him. Donovan and his remaining men looked frantically for cover, caught in the open between Olivia's shotgun and Sebastian's rifle. "Quinn," Donovan snarled, "this ain't your fight." "You made it my fight when you shot that deputy," Sebastian replied, his voice cold as he began descending the ridge, rifle still trained on the outlaws. "Drop your weapons, all of you." The injured man immediately complied, throwing his pistol into the dirt. The others hesitated, looking to Donovan. "Do it," Donovan finally ordered his men, though he kept his own pistol. "Quinn, let's be reasonable. Whitman's paying good money for this land, enough to split 3 ways. 4 ways, Sebastian corrected, drawing closer. "You're forgetting Miss Caldwell." Donovan snorted. "The woman's got nothing to bargain with. Her father's dying, her land's about to be foreclosed, and her only protector is outnumbered." "Is that so?" Sebastian had reached the yard now, positioning himself where he could see all the outlaws. "Funny thing happened on my tracking expedition. I ran into some Texas Rangers just across the territorial line. Seems they've been after you boys for quite some time." He gestured with his rifle toward the ridge. "They should be arriving any minute now." Donovan's eyes darted to the ridge, then back to Sebastian. "You're bluffing." "Maybe," Sebastian allowed. "Care to wager your life on it?" The standoff stretched for several tense seconds. Then, with a movement almost too quick to follow, Donovan raised his pistol and fired at Sebastian. Sebastian dove to the side, returning fire as he rolled. Olivia seized the moment of chaos to rush from her hiding place toward Jenkins, keeping low as bullets flew above her. When she reached the deputy, she found him pale but conscious, blood soaking his shirt. "Hold on," she whispered, tearing strips from her petticoat to press against his wound. The gunfire ceased abruptly. Olivia looked up to see Donovan on his knees, clutching his shoulder, his pistol in the dirt before him. His men had all dropped their weapons, hands raised in surrender. Sebastian approached them cautiously, blood seeping from a graze on his arm where Donovan's bullet had caught him. "Olivia," he called, his eyes never leaving the outlaws. "Are you hurt?" "No," she answered, still pressing on Jenkins' wound. "But the deputy needs a doctor urgently." Sebastian nodded. "One of you," he addressed Donovan's men, "is going to ride to town for the doctor and the sheriff. The rest of you are staying right here until they arrive." One of the younger outlaws was dispatched to town, riding bareback on one of the horses Olivia had managed to recapture. The others were bound securely and placed under the shade of a tree, where Sebastian could watch them while helping Olivia move Jenkins into the house. "I was afraid you wouldn't come back in time," Olivia admitted as they worked together to make the deputy comfortable. "I almost didn't," Sebastian replied grimly. "Found the Donovan's trail leading into New Mexico but lost it near the border. Was on my way back when I ran into a ranger patrol. They told me the gang had been spotted heading back this way." He looked at her intently. "I rode all night to get here." Olivia's heart quickened at his words and the concern evident in his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for coming back." "I made a promise," he replied simply. Hours later, Sheriff Parker arrived with Dr. Mitchell and several deputies. Jenkins was loaded carefully into a wagon for the journey back to town, while Donovan and his men were shackled for the ride to the jail. "Donovan's been singing like a canary," Sheriff Parker informed Sebastian and Olivia as the prisoners were led away. "Says Whitman hired them to drive you off your land, Miss Caldwell. Even paid them extra to make sure your father's injuries looked like part of a random attack. We've had railroad men here offering to buy a right-of-way," Olivia told him. "They're planning a water station where our creek runs." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "That explains Whitman's urgency. Railroad contracts are worth a fortune." He turned to Sebastian. "The Rangers will want to talk to Donovan about those robberies in Texas, but we've got him dead to rights on attempted murder here. What about Whitman?" Sebastian asked, his hand unconsciously moving to Olivia's shoulder in a protective gesture. "I've sent deputies to bring him in for questioning," the sheriff replied. "Between Donovan's confession and those railroad documents Miss Caldwell showed me, we've got enough to hold him." He looked apologetically at Olivia. though I suspect a man like Whitman will find a way to avoid the worst consequences. As long as he leaves us in peace, Olivia said firmly. After the sheriff departed, Sebastian and Olivia stood together on the porch, watching the dust settle on the road. "What will you do now?" Olivia asked, turning to look at him. "The Donovans are captured. Your hunt is over." Sebastian was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes contemplative. "I received a wire from the Rangers while in town yesterday. They're offering me a position. Seems my reputation has reached the right ears." "That's wonderful," Olivia said, ignoring the sinking feeling in her chest. "You'd make an excellent ranger." "I haven't accepted yet," he said, studying her face. "Told them I had unfinished business here." Hope fluttered in Olivia's heart. "What business is that?" Sebastian took a step closer. "The railroad will still want that right-of-way through your property. With Whitman exposed, they'll likely approach you directly with a fair offer." "Probably," she agreed, wondering why he was discussing business matters when she'd hoped for something entirely different. "You'll need someone who understands contracts, negotiations," he continued. "Someone to make sure you're not taken advantage of." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering to be my business advisor, Mr. Quinn?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Among other things, Miss Caldwell." He took her hand gently. "If you'll have me." Olivia's breath caught. "What exactly are you proposing, Sebastian?" "That depends," he said, his voice deepening. "If I were to stay, build a life here, would I be welcome?" "You know you would," she whispered. Sebastian's free hand moved to her cheek, his touch feather-light. "Then I'm proposing we see where this leads. I'm proposing I help rebuild this homestead, negotiate with the railroad, and be here when your father returns." His eyes held hers intently. "I'm proposing that I stay with you, Olivia Caldwell, for as long as you'll have me." "My word on that is law," she murmured, a smile spreading across her face as she echoed his defense of her in the sheriff's office. "So it is," Sebastian agreed and lowered his lips to hers. A week later, Henry Caldwell returned home to find his barn rebuilt, his daughter glowing with happiness, and a Texas Ranger to be asking for permission to court her properly. Though weak from his ordeal, Henry's handshake was firm when he welcomed Sebastian to their family. The railroad negotiations proceeded smoothly, with Sebastian proving to be a shrewd advocate for the Caldwells' interests. The final agreement granted a right-of-way across a small portion of their northern boundary in exchange for a sum that not only cleared their debt, but allowed for expansion of their herd and improvements to the homestead. Whitman faced charges for his role in the attack, though as Sheriff Parker had predicted, his wealth and connections earned him a lighter sentence than justice demanded. He was forced to sell his interests in the bank and leave the territory, his reputation in tatters. As for the Donovans, they were transferred to Texas to stand trial for their crimes there, ensuring they would spend many years behind bars. On a crisp autumn evening 6 months after their first meeting, Sebastian and Olivia stood together on the porch of the homestead, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and purple. "The Rangers sent another wire today," Sebastian said, his arm around Olivia's waist. "They're establishing a new post 20 miles from here. Offered me the position of captain." Olivia looked up at him, noting the quiet pride in his eyes. "That's wonderful news. Will you accept?" "Already did," he replied, "on one condition." "And what condition was that?" she asked, though the look in his eyes told her she already knew the answer. Sebastian reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. From it, he produced a simple gold band with a single small diamond. "That they understand I have prior commitments here." He took her hand, his expression solemn yet tender. "Olivia Caldwell, your word has been law to me since the moment I met you. Now I'm asking for your word on something else entirely." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak as Sebastian slipped the ring onto her finger. "Is that a yes?" he asked, a rare smile lighting his features. "That's a yes," she confirmed, throwing her arms around his neck. My word is law, remember? How could I forget? Sebastian murmured before capturing her lips with his. It's what brought me home. 3 years later, the Silverwater Creek railway station opened to great fanfare, bringing new prosperity to the region. From the platform, passengers could see a thriving ranch on the nearby hillside, with a creek running through lush pastures where cattle grazed contentedly. The ranch house stood proud against the landscape, smoke curling from its chimney. Those who knew the area well might point out Captain Sebastian Quinn's ranger office in the small building near the main house, where he conducted official business when not on patrol. They might also mention that Mrs. Olivia Quinn was known to be as formidable a negotiator as her husband was a lawman, having secured favorable contracts with the railroad for several neighboring ranchers after her own successful deal. And if travelers arrived on the right day, they might glimpse the entire Quinn family together, Sebastian and Olivia, their young son Henry named for his grandfather who still lived with them, and the infant daughter with her mother's green eyes and her father's serious expression. Some old-timers in town still remembered how it all began with a desperate young woman whom no one believed, and a bounty hunter who declared her word was law to him. But that was just the beginning of their story, not the end. For Sebastian and Olivia Quinn, their life together was proof that sometimes justice and love could be found in the same place, if only you were brave enough to fight for both.